The thundering crack of Bartholomew Walker's open palm across his daughter's cheek silenced the modest ranch house nestled on the outskirts of Cottonwood Springs, Colorado Territory, 1871. Bethany Walker stumbled backward, her honey-brown eyes wide with disbelief as she pressed a trembling hand to her burning cheek. "You'll marry Henry Thatcher and that's the end of it," Bartholomew roared, his weathered face flushed with rage. "The man's offered $500 for your hand enough to save this ranch and put food on our table for a year." "Father, please," Bethany pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. At 20 years old, she'd endured her father's mercurial temper since her mother's death 5 years prior, but never had he struck her with such force. "I cannot marry a man 3 times my age who's buried 2 wives already." Bartholomew's gray-flecked beard quivered with anger. "You think I care for your foolish notions of love? This drought has taken everything. The cattle are dying, the crops have withered, and the bank is breathing down my neck." He jabbed a finger toward the window where the parched landscape stretched toward distant mountains. "Thatcher's money is our salvation. I'm not livestock to be sold at auction," Bethany countered, finding her courage despite the sting in her cheek. "You're my daughter, and you'll do as I say." Bartholomew thundered, slamming his fist on the worn oak table, causing the oil lamp to flicker precariously. "Thatcher will be here tomorrow at noon to finalize arrangements. You best be ready." Tears threatened to spill, but Bethany refused to let them fall. Her father had once been a kind man before the drought, before the debts, before the whiskey. Now he was a hollow shell of the man who had once sung her to sleep and taught her to ride her first pony. 3 days, Bartholomew continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You'll be Mrs. Henry Thatcher in 3 days' time." After her father stormed out, slamming the door behind him, Bethany crumpled to the floor, her calico dress pooling around her. The walls of the ranch house that had once represented safety now felt like the bars of a prison. She could not be sold like chattel to a man known throughout the territory for his cruelty toward his past wives. As night fell, Bethany made her decision. With trembling hands, she packed a small carpet bag with her meager belongings. A change of clothes, her mother's silver hairbrush, a daguerreotype of her parents in happier times, and the $20 she had saved from selling eggs and butter in town. It wasn't much, but it might be enough to start anew somewhere her father and Henry Thatcher couldn't find her. Before dawn broke over the eastern plains, Bethany crept from the house, her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. She made her way to the stables where she saddled Maple, her chestnut mare, whispering soothing words as the horse nickered softly. "We've got to go, sweet girl," Bethany murmured, securing her bag to the saddle. "There's nothing for us here anymore." With one last glance at the only home she had ever known, Bethany urged Maple forward into the uncertain darkness, the first streaks of dawn beginning to paint the horizon in shades of pink and gold. She had no destination in mind, only the desperate need to escape the future her father had bartered away without a second thought. The morning sun climbed higher as Bethany rode westward, following the meandering course of the Cottonwood River. She knew the safest route would be to head for Denver, where a young woman might find honest work and disappear among the city's growing population. But Denver was days away, and she had no doubt her father would come looking for her once he discovered her absence. By midday, exhaustion and hunger gnawed at her. Bethany guided Maple toward a stand of cottonwoods near the riverbank, dismounting with stiff limbs. She had managed to grab a small bundle of jerky and a half loaf of bread before fleeing, and she rationed a small portion for her meager lunch. "We'll rest here for a bit," she told Maple, stroking the mare's neck as she drank from the river. "Just until the sun isn't so high." It was there, dozing fitfully beneath the dappled shade of the cottonwoods, that Bethany woke to the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Panic surged through her veins as she scrambled to her feet, frantically grabbing for Maple's reins. "Whoa there, miss," called a deep voice. "Didn't mean to startle you." Bethany whirled around to face a lone rider, his broad-shouldered frame silhouetted against the afternoon sky. As he drew closer, She could make out a strong-jawed face beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson, kind eyes the color of a summer storm, and a smile that somehow eased the knot of fear in her stomach. "Are you all right?" he asked, swinging down from his dun gelding with the easy grace of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. "Not often I come across a lady alone out here." "I'm fine," Bethany answered quickly, too quickly, "just resting before continuing my journey." The stranger's gaze swept over her disheveled appearance, the hastily packed bag, and the fading mark on her cheek. His expression darkened momentarily, but his voice remained gentle. "Name's Jackson Xanders," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Friends call me Jax. I've got coffee brewing at my camp just around the bend if you'd care to join me." Bethany hesitated, weighing her limited options. This man was a stranger, but something in his direct gaze and the respectful distance he maintained told her he meant no harm. Still, she'd heard enough cautionary tales about the dangers a woman faced alone on the frontier. "I'm Bethany Walker," she finally replied, deciding that revealing her name wouldn't put her in any more danger than she was already in. "And thank you for the offer, but I should keep moving." Jackson nodded, replacing his hat. "Where are you headed, Miss Walker?" "Next town's Silver Creek, but it's a good 20 miles west." Bethany faltered, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. She had no real plan, no destination, just the desperate need to escape. "I'm going wherever this road takes me." Something in her voice must have betrayed her distress, for Jackson's expression softened further. "Running from something or someone?" he asked, his tone matter of fact but not judgmental. Bethany's chin lifted defiantly. "That's my business, Mr. Xanders." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fair enough, but you look like you could use a hot meal and a safe place to rest before continuing that business." He gestured toward the bend in the river. "My camp is just there. You can keep your horse saddled and ready if it makes you feel safer." "I give you my word as a gentleman, I mean you no harm." Hunger and exhaustion warred with caution in Bethany's mind. Finally, practicality won out. "One meal," she conceded, "and then I'll be on my way." Jackson's camp was indeed just around the river bend, a simple setup with a small fire, a coffee pot, and a bedroll beneath a makeshift lean-to. The aroma of coffee and beans simmering in a cast iron pot made Bethany's stomach growl audibly. True to his word, Jackson kept a respectful distance as Bethany settled near the fire, keeping Maple close by. He handed her a tin cup of strong, black coffee without comment, then busied himself with the cooking pot. "Been on the trail long?" he asked conversationally, stirring the beans. "Just since dawn," Bethany admitted, the coffee warming her from the inside out. Jackson nodded, adding a pinch of salt to the pot. "I'm heading to Silver Creek myself. Got a small spread just outside town, nothing fancy, but the grass is good and the water's plentiful." He glanced up, catching her studying him. "I drive cattle to Denver twice a year, just finished this season's drive and heading back home." There was something comforting about his straightforward manner, the way he offered information without pressing for hers in return. Bethany found herself relaxing slightly, though she remained alert. "Here you go," Jackson said, offering her a plate of beans with strips of bacon and a thick slice of cornbread. "It's not fancy cooking, but it'll fill the hollow spots." Bethany couldn't remember when food had tasted so good. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, watching Jackson from beneath her lashes. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with calloused hands that spoke of hard work and a face tanned by years under the western sun. "Thank you," she said when she'd finished, setting the plate aside. "I appreciate your kindness." "You're welcome," he replied simply. Then, after a moment's hesitation, "That mark on your face, someone did that to you, didn't they?" Bethany's hand flew instinctively to her cheek, her eyes dropping to the ground. "It's nothing." "Doesn't look like nothing," Jackson observed quietly. "A man who raises his hand to a woman isn't much of a man at all." The compassion in his voice nearly undid her. Bethany felt tears burning behind her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "My father has made arrangements for me to marry," she found herself saying. A wealthy rancher named Henry Thatcher has offered $500 for me, like I'm cattle to be sold at auction." Jackson's jaw tightened, a muscle working in his cheek. Henry Thatcher of Broken Bow Ranch. When Bethany nodded, he exhaled slowly. "I know of him. His reputation isn't favorable. He's buried 2 wives already," Bethany whispered. "They say the second one fell down the stairs, but everyone knows better." She looked up, meeting Jackson's stormy gaze. "I won't be the third." "No," Jackson agreed firmly. "You won't." He set his coffee cup down with deliberate care. "Silver Creek's a good town. Sheriff, there is a fair man. He might be able to help you." Hope flickered within Bethany's chest. "Do you really think so?" "I do," Jackson affirmed. "And I'd be honored to escort you there safely if you'd allow it." Bethany studied him, weighing his offer against her limited options. Traveling alone as a woman was dangerous. Bandits, wild animals, and the unforgiving elements were all threats. Having a companion, especially one who knew the territory, would significantly improve her chances. "Why would you help me?" she asked finally. "You don't even know me." Jackson's smile was gentle. "My mother raised me to believe that a person's character is judged by how they treat those who can offer them nothing in return." He shrugged. "Besides, we're headed the same way. Makes sense to travel together." As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Bethany made her decision. "All right, Mr. Xanders, I accept your escort to Silver Creek." "Jax," he corrected with a smile. "My friends call me Jax." They set out at dawn the next morning, the eastern sky ablaze with color as they followed the winding course of the Cottonwood River. Jackson rode slightly ahead, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing bits of history about the territory. His easy manner and respectful distance gradually eased Bethany's wariness, and by midday, she found herself genuinely enjoying his company. "How did you end up ranching in Silver Creek?" she asked as they stopped to water the horses at a clear running stream. Jackson smiled, removing his hat to wipe his brow. "Came west from Pennsylvania after the war, served with the Union Army. Nothing heroic, mostly scouting and dispatch riding. When it ended, I couldn't stomach going back to city life." He gestured to the vast landscape around them. "Something about this country gets in your blood, the openness of it, the honesty." "The loneliness," Bethany added softly. "That too," Jackson acknowledged. "But I've got good neighbors and the town's growing. Sheriff Patterson keeps order and there's even a schoolhouse now." He glanced at her. "You mentioned selling eggs and butter back home. You have some experience with farming," Bethany nodded. "I've managed our household since my mother died 5 years ago. The garden, the chickens, preserving, cooking." Pride straightened her spine. "I can shoot too, Father taught me before." "Before things got difficult." "Useful skills out here," Jackson observed. "Silver Creek could use someone like you." The general store owner, Mrs. Holloway, has been talking about hiring help. Her arthritis makes it hard for her to manage alone. The suggestion kindled a spark of hope in Bethany's chest. A position in a store would provide legitimate employment and perhaps a room. It was more than she had dared hope for when she fled. As they continued their journey, Bethany found herself watching Jackson, the confident way he sat his horse, the kindness in his interactions with both his mount and hers, the quiet strength he exuded without demanding attention. He was unlike any man she had known, certainly different from the rough-handed cowboys who worked her father's ranch, or the entitled sons of wealthy ranchers who viewed women as accessories to be acquired. By nightfall, they had made good progress, but still had at least a day's ride before reaching Silver Creek. Jackson made camp in a sheltered hollow, efficiently building a fire and preparing a simple supper of salt pork, beans, and the last of his cornbread. "Tell me about your ranch," Bethany asked as they ate beneath a canopy of stars so brilliant they seemed close enough to touch. Jackson's face lit up with pride. "It's small compared to some just about 300 acres with a creek running through it. The house isn't much, 2 rooms with a lean-to kitchen, but the land is good. Started with just 10 head of cattle 5 years ago. Now I've got nearly 100. You've built something impressive," Bethany observed, "on your own terms." "That's all any of us can hope for," Jackson replied, his gaze meeting hers across the fire. "The chance to make our own way by our own lights." The understanding that passed between them in that moment felt more intimate than any touch. Bethany looked away first, suddenly aware of the quickening of her pulse. "We should get some rest," Jackson said, clearing his throat. "I'll take first watch. You can have my bedroll. It's clean, I promise." Bethany started to protest, but fatigue weighed heavily on her. "Wake me for the second watch," she insisted. "I'm not helpless." Jackson's smile held genuine respect. "Never thought you were, Miss Walker." Wrapped in Jackson's bedroll, breathing in the faint scent of pine and leather that clung to the rough wool, Bethany drifted toward sleep. For the first time since fleeing her father's ranch, she felt something close to safe. The peace was shattered before dawn. Bethany woke to Jackson's hand on her shoulder, his voice low and urgent near her ear. "Riders coming. Stay quiet." Fully alert in an instant, Bethany slipped from the bedroll, gathering her skirts silently as she moved to where Maple stood beneath a cottonwood tree. Jackson had already doused the fire and was saddling his gelding, his movements swift and precise. "How many?" Bethany whispered, her fingers fumbling with Maple's saddle straps. "3, maybe 4, Jackson replied, his expression grim in the pre-dawn light. Could be nothing, but best not to take chances. They worked quickly, preparing the horses, gathering their meager belongings. Just as they were about to mount up, the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats grew louder, and Bethany's blood ran cold as a familiar voice called out. "There, by the trees." "Father," Bethany breathed, fear paralyzing her momentarily. Jackson's hand found her elbow, steady and reassuring. "Get on your horse," he instructed calmly. "Stay behind me." Bethany scrambled into Maple's saddle just as 3 riders emerged from the shadowy tree line: her father, Henry Thatcher, and one of Thatcher's ranch hands. Even in the dim light, she could see the fury contorting her father's face, the cold determination in Thatcher's posture. "There's my wayward bride," Thatcher called, his voice carrying across the clearing with an oily smoothness that made Bethany's skin crawl. He was a barrel-chested man in his 60s, with small, close-set eyes and jowls that quivered when he spoke. "Come now, girl. You've led us on quite a chase." Jackson positioned his horse between Bethany and the approaching men, his posture relaxed but his hand resting near the revolver at his hip. "Morning, gentlemen," he said, his tone deceptively pleasant. "Something I can help you with?" Bartholomew Walker's face contorted with rage. "That's my daughter you've got there, mister. Step aside." "Miss Walker has hired me as her escort to Silver Creek," Jackson replied evenly. "I don't believe she wishes to return with you," Thatcher laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Hired you, did she? With what? A pretty smile and perhaps more?" His gaze slid to Bethany, making her feel soiled. "Whatever she's promised you, boy, I'll double it. The girl and I have an arrangement." "No, Mr. Thatcher," Jackson corrected, steel entering his voice. "You have an arrangement with her father. The lady hasn't agreed to anything." Bartholomew's face flushed dark with anger. "She's my daughter. She'll do as she's told." "She's a grown woman," Jackson countered, "free to make her own choices." Thatcher's thin patience visibly snapped. "I paid good money for that girl, $500 to that drunk fool beside me. She's mine by rights, and I mean to collect what I paid for." Something dangerous flashed in Jackson's eyes. "Her worth could never be counted in coin, Mr. Thatcher. No woman's could." He straightened in the saddle, his voice carrying clear authority now. "I suggest you gentlemen turn around and head back where you came from. Miss Walker isn't property to be bought and sold." Thatcher's hand moved toward the gun at his hip, but Jackson's was faster, his revolver clearing its holster in one fluid motion, aimed steadily at Thatcher's chest before the older man's fingers had even closed around his weapon. "I wouldn't," Jackson advised quietly. The ranch hand with Thatcher reached for his own gun, but froze when Jackson cocked the hammer of his revolver. "That goes for you too, friend. I've got no quarrel with you, but I will defend the lady's right to choose her own path." A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft nickering of horses and the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods. Finally, Bartholomew spoke, his voice cracking. "Bethany, please, the ranch will be lost without Thatcher's money." For the first time, Bethany nudged Maple forward, bringing herself even with Jackson. You lost the ranch long before now, father to whiskey and cards and poor choices. I won't sacrifice my life to pay for your mistakes. You ungrateful, Bartholomew began, but Thatcher cut him off with a raised hand. This isn't over, Thatcher promised, his gaze shifting between Jackson and Bethany. No one makes a fool of Henry Thatcher. You've done that well enough on your own, Jackson observed mildly. Now ride on and leave the lady be. With a final venomous glare, Thatcher wheeled his horse around, jerking the reins so harshly the animal whinnied in protest. Bartholomew lingered a moment longer, his expression a complicated mixture of rage and something that might have been regret. "You're dead to me, girl," he spat finally. Before following Thatcher, Bethany watched them go, an odd, hollow sensation spreading through her chest. For all his faults, Bartholomew Walker was the only family she had known. Now she truly had nothing, no home, no family, no certainties beyond this moment. "They won't give up so easily," Jackson said quietly once the riders had disappeared into the trees. "Thatcher's not a man who accepts defeat." "I know," Bethany replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "What do we do now?" Jackson holstered his weapon, his expression thoughtful. "We change course, head north toward Elk Ridge, then circle back to Silver Creek from the east. It'll add a day to our journey, but it might throw them off our trail." Bethany nodded, grateful for his clear-headed approach. "Thank you," she said softly, "for what you said back there about my worth." Jackson's gaze met hers, unwavering and sincere. "I meant every word, Miss Walker." Something warm unfurled in Bethany's chest, a feeling so foreign after years of her father's coldness that she scarcely recognized it. "Bethany," she corrected gently. "My friends call me Bethany." The journey to Silver Creek took 3 more days, following Jackson's revised route through rugged country that tested both riders and horses. They traveled from dawn until dusk each day, making camp in defensible positions, always alert for signs of pursuit. Despite the constant tension, Bethany found herself growing more comfortable in Jackson's company. Their conversations flowed easily as they rode side by side, discussing everything from books they had read to their hopes for the future. Jackson spoke of expanding his ranch, perhaps adding sheep to his cattle operation. Bethany shared her dream of someday having a small business of her own, perhaps a bakery, as her mother had taught her to make pies and breads that had once been sought after by neighbors for miles around. "You should taste my apple pie," she told him as they shared a simple supper of rabbit stew on their final night on the trail. "My mother's recipe, cinnamon and a touch of nutmeg in the crust." Jackson grinned, firelight dancing in his eyes. "I'd like that very much." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, laden with possibility. Bethany found herself imagining a future where she might bake such a pie in a kitchen of her own, with Jackson sitting at the table, his smile warming her more than any hearth fire. "Tell me about Silver Creek," she said, pushing the fanciful image aside. "What's it really like?" Jackson considered the question, stirring the fire with a stick. "It's a young town still finding its way, about 300 souls, give or take. There's the general store I mentioned, a decent hotel, 2 saloons, though Mabel's is the respectable one where even ladies can take tea in the afternoon. There's a church, a doctor who doubles as a dentist, and a small school. And the sheriff you mentioned, he's a good man, Jim Patterson." "Salt of the earth," Jackson affirmed. "Fought in the war, same as me, believes in the law but knows justice and law aren't always the same thing." He glanced at her. "He'll help us if Thatcher comes calling with his false claims." The us in his statement warmed Bethany more than it should have. "And what will people think about me arriving in town with a man I barely know?" Jackson's expression grew serious. "Mrs. Holloway, the store owner I mentioned, is a widow of impeccable reputation. If she takes you in, gives you work, no one would dare question your character." He hesitated. "And as for traveling with me, we could say you're my cousin, come out west after losing your parents. It's a common enough story." Bethany nodded slowly, grateful for his consideration of her reputation. "Thank you, that's very thoughtful." They lapsed into comfortable silence, the crackling fire and chorus of night insects the only sounds in their small camp. After a while, Jackson spoke again, his voice quieter. What will you do in Silver Creek? The question held more weight than its simple words suggested. Bethany considered it carefully. Find honest work, make a new life, learn who I am when I'm not just Bartholomew Walker's daughter. She looked up at him. Beyond that, I don't know. Jackson nodded, understanding in his gaze. Sometimes not knowing is the beginning of the greatest adventures. When Bethany finally drifted to sleep that night, wrapped in Jackson's bedroll as had become their custom, her dreams were not haunted by her father's anger or Thatcher's cold eyes, but filled instead with images of a small house by a creek, apple pies cooling on a windowsill, and Jackson's smile warming her from across a kitchen table. Silver Creek appeared on the horizon late the following afternoon, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley where two creeks converged. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the steeple of a small church caught the golden light of the setting sun. To Bethany's eyes, it looked like a painting too perfect to be real. "Home," Jackson said simply, a note of pride in his voice. As they rode down the main street, Bethany felt the curious stares of townspeople. A young woman riding alongside Jackson Xanders was clearly an object of interest. She sat straighter in the saddle, chin lifted, determined to face whatever awaited her with dignity. Jackson guided them to a neat two-story building with Holloway's General Mercantile painted in fading letters across its facade. He dismounted, then moved to help Bethany down from Maple. His hands at her waist were strong and steady, and for a brief moment after her feet touched the ground they remained there, a warm pressure she found herself reluctant to lose. "Mrs. Holloway is a good judge of character," Jackson told her quietly. "Be honest with her and she'll be fair with you." The bell above the store's door jingled as they entered. A gray-haired woman looked up from behind the counter, her weathered face breaking into a smile at the sight of Jackson. "Jack Xanders, back from Denver already." Her shrewd gaze shifted to Bethany. "And with company, I see, Mrs. Holloway. This is Miss Bethany Walker," Jackson said, removing his hat. "My cousin from back east. She's recently lost her parents and has come west for a fresh start." The older woman's eyes, bright blue and missing nothing, studied Bethany carefully. There was a knowing glint in them that suggested she didn't entirely believe Jackson's tale, but she nodded nonetheless. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Walker. Always room for another hard-working soul in Silver Creek." She extended a hand gnarled with arthritis. "Margaret Holloway." "Thank you for your welcome, Mrs. Holloway," Bethany replied, shaking the offered hand. "I'm hoping to find employment and lodging in town." "Well now," Mrs. Holloway said, glancing between them with undisguised interest, "as it happens, I've been looking for help in the store. These old hands don't move like they used to, and I've got a small room upstairs you could rent for a reasonable price." She fixed Bethany with a direct gaze. "Can you read and cipher?" "Yes, madam, and I'm experienced with keeping household accounts." "Good, we'll give it a trial, say 2 weeks. If we suit each other, we can discuss more permanent arrangements." Mrs. Holloway turned to Jackson. "You vouching for this young lady, Jax?" "With my life, Mrs. Holloway," Jackson replied without hesitation. Something in his tone made Bethany's heart skip a beat. She glanced at him, finding his gaze already on her, warm with an emotion she dared not name. "Well then," Mrs. Holloway said, satisfaction in her voice, "that's good enough for me." She gestured toward a narrow staircase at the back of the store. "Room's up there, first door on the right. Nothing fancy, but it's clean. Wash up and rest, and we'll talk terms over supper." Relief washed through Bethany like a cleansing rain. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. I can't express my gratitude enough." "Save your thanks until you've tasted my cooking," the older woman replied with a chuckle. "Jax, you staying for supper?" Margaret Holloway's legendary chicken and dumplings deserves more appreciation than just 2 women. Jackson hesitated, glancing at Bethany. "I should check in with Sheriff Patterson first, let him know we might have visitors looking for Miss Walker in the coming days." Understanding passed between them, and Bethany nodded gratefully. "Perhaps you could join us after." "I'd like that," he replied, his smile sending warmth spreading through her chest. After Jackson departed, Mrs. Holloway showed Bethany to her room, a small but tidy space with a narrow bed, a washstand, a chest of drawers, and a window overlooking the main street. It was simple, but it was clean and most importantly hers. "Get settled, then come down to help with supper," Mrs. Holloway instructed. At the door, she paused, her expression softening. "Whatever brought you here, Miss Walker, and I suspect it's not the story Jack's offered. You're safe now. Silver Creek looks after its own." Tears pricked at Bethany's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Left alone, Bethany sank onto the edge of the bed, overcome by the whirlwind of emotions coursing through her. 4 days ago, she had fled her father's house with nothing but a carpetbag and desperate hope. Now she had a room, the promise of employment, and a fresh start in a town where no one knew her as Bartholomew Walker's daughter, and Jackson. The thought of him brought both warmth and uncertainty. In the short time she had known him, he had shown her more kindness and respect than any man in her life. He had defended her honor and her freedom, asked nothing in return, and looked at her in a way that made her feel truly seen for perhaps the first time. But what did it mean? Once she was settled in Silver Creek, would he return to his ranch and his life? The thought brought an unexpected pang of sadness. Pushing these thoughts aside, Bethany washed the trailed dust from her face and hands, changed into her cleanest dress, and went downstairs to help with supper preparations. Mrs. Holloway set her to work rolling out dumplings, chatting all the while about town gossip and the rhythms of the store. It was comfortable, familiar work, and Bethany found herself relaxing into it. Jackson returned just as they were setting the table, Sheriff Patterson at his side. The sheriff was a tall, lean man with a graying mustache and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He greeted Bethany with a tip of his hat and a gentle handshake. "Miss Walker, welcome to Silver Creek. Jax here has told me a bit about your situation." His expression grew serious. "I want you to know that as long as I'm sheriff in this town, no one, not your father, not Henry Thatcher, can force you to do anything against your will. You have my word on that." Gratitude swelled in Bethany's chest. "Thank you, Sheriff. That means more than I can say," over Mrs. Holloway's excellent chicken and dumplings. They discussed the practicalities of Bethany's new life in Silver Creek. The sheriff advised her to write a clear statement detailing her departure from her father's home and the circumstances surrounding Thatcher's arrangement, which he would keep on file should legal questions arise. "And if Thatcher or your father do show up in town," Sheriff Patterson added, "you come straight to me or find Jax. Don't face them alone." "Thatcher's not a man to give up easily," Jackson observed, his expression grim. $500 is a significant investment for him. "Then he should be more careful where he puts his money," Mrs. Holloway sniffed disapprovingly. "Trying to buy a young woman like she's cattle at auction, disgraceful." The conversation shifted to lighter topics as the meal progressed. Mrs. Holloway regaled them with stories of Silver Creek's early days, and Sheriff Patterson shared amusing anecdotes about the more colorful citizens who had passed through the jail's cells. Throughout it all, Bethany found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Jackson. The way the lamplight caught the angles of his face, the deep rumble of his laugh, the quiet intensity in his eyes when they met hers across the table, all of it stirred something in her she had never felt before. As the evening wound down, Sheriff Patterson took his leave with a final reassurance to Bethany. Mrs. Holloway, claiming fatigue, retired to her own quarters at the back of the store, leaving Bethany and Jackson alone in the kitchen. "I should head back to my ranch," Jackson said, though he made no move to rise from his chair. "It's been a while since I've checked on things." "Of course," Bethany nodded, ignoring the twinge of disappointment the words brought. "You've done so much for me already." "I couldn't ask for more of your time." Jackson studied her face in the soft lamplight. "You haven't asked for anything, Bethany. Everything I've done has been my choice." He hesitated, then added quietly, "and one I'd make again in a heartbeat." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Why?" she asked, the question barely above a whisper. "Why did you help me? The truth." Jackson's hand moved across the table, coming to rest just beside hers, not quite touching. "Because from the moment I saw you by that river, something inside me knew that my life wouldn't be the same if I rode away." His fingers bridged the small gap between them, gently covering hers. and every moment since has only confirmed it. Bethany's heart hammered in her chest, hope and fear battling within her. "I don't have anything to offer," she said softly. "No dowry, no family connections, just myself." "That's all I'd ever want," Jackson replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Just you, Bethany Walker, exactly as you are." Tears blurred her vision as she turned her hand beneath his, threading their fingers together. "I don't even know what that means yet, who I am when I'm making my own choices." Jackson's smile was gentle. "Then we'll discover it together, one day at a time, no rush, no pressure." He squeezed her hand lightly. "I've got a ranch to run, and you've got a new job to learn. We've got time." The promise in those simple words, time together, discovery, filled Bethany with a joy so intense it was almost painful. "I'd like that," she whispered. "Very much." In the year that followed, Bethany blossomed in Silver Creek. Under Mrs. Holloway's tutelage, she learned the intricacies of running the general store, eventually taking over the bookkeeping entirely when the older woman's arthritis made writing too difficult. She made friends among the townspeople, joined the church choir, and even began teaching reading to several children whose families lived too far from town to attend the school regularly. Her father and Henry Thatcher did come to Silver Creek, 2 months after her arrival. True to his word, Sheriff Patterson stood firm, informing them that Bethany was a free woman of legal age who had committed no crime. When Thatcher threatened legal action, waiving the promissory note Bartholomew had signed, Jackson stepped forward with an offer to repay the $500 with interest to settle the matter once and for all. "Where would you get that kind of money, boy?" Thatcher had sneered. "I've just sold 60 head of prime cattle in Denver," Jackson replied evenly. "And I'd consider it the best investment I ever made." In the end, Thatcher took the money, his pride requiring some form of victory. Bartholomew, sobered by the public humiliation and the realization of what he had nearly done to his only child, attempted to speak with Bethany before leaving town. Their conversation was brief and painful, but it ended with a fragile peace that, while not forgiveness, at least closed the door on the past without bitterness. Through it all, Jackson was Bethany's steadfast support. His ranch was only 5 miles from town, and he made a point of riding in at least 3 times a week. They took Sunday walks along the creek, picnicked in mountain meadows bursting with wildflowers, and spent long evenings on Mrs. Holloway's porch, talking about everything and nothing. Slowly, carefully, their friendship deepened into something more. Their first kiss came on a crisp autumn evening beneath a canopy of stars so bright they seemed to sing. Jackson had just walked Bethany back to the store after a town dance, where they had waltzed together for the first time. "I've been wanting to do that for months," Jackson confessed afterward, his forehead resting against hers, his hands gentle at her waist. "What took you so long?" Bethany teased, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. "I was waiting," he replied simply, "for you to be ready. For you to know your own mind and heart without doubt." In that moment, Bethany knew with absolute certainty that she loved this man not because he had rescued her, not because he had paid her father's debt, but because of who he was. Kind, honorable, patient, and strong enough to respect her journey toward independence. They were married the following spring in Silver Creek's small church, with Mrs. Holloway beaming proudly from the front pew and Sheriff Patterson standing as Jackson's best man. Bethany wore a dress of ivory silk that she and Mrs. Holloway had sewn together, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered that morning from the meadows near Jackson's ranch, now their ranch. Jackson had spent the winter adding 2 rooms to the small house, including a proper kitchen with a window overlooking the creek, just as Bethany had once dreamed. On their wedding night, as they stood on the porch of their home watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, Jackson wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Happy?" he asked softly. Bethany leaned back against his solid warmth, covering his hands with hers where they rested at her waist. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. "Your father sent a letter," Jackson said after a moment. "It arrived yesterday. I was waiting for the right time to give it to you." He reached into his pocket, producing an envelope. "You don't have to read it now or ever if you don't want to." Bethany took the envelope, turning it over in her hands. Her name was written on the front in her father's familiar scrawl. After a moment's hesitation, she opened it, unfolding a single sheet of paper. The message was brief but heartfelt, an apology, a blessing on her marriage, and the news that he had given up drinking and was working to restore the ranch to its former prosperity with the help of a neighboring widow who had, he wrote with evident surprise, agreed to become his wife. "He's trying," Bethany said softly, folding the letter and returning it to the envelope. "That's something. Do you want to visit him someday?" Jackson asked, no judgment in his tone. Bethany considered the question. "Perhaps, someday, but not yet." She turned in his arms, looking up at the face that had become her home, her safe harbor. "Right now, this is where I want to be, where I choose to be." Jackson's smile was tender as he cradled her face in his hands. "And I choose you, Bethany Xanders, today and every day." As their lips met in a kiss that held both promise and passion, Bethany marveled at the journey that had brought her here, from a frightened young woman fleeing an unwanted marriage to a confident wife embracing a future built on love and respect. Her father had tried to sell her future, but Jackson had shown her that her worth could never be counted in coin, only in the love they shared, the life they would build together, and the freedom to choose their own path, side by side.